Here we're back for lecture 3. Lecture 3. We'll talk about efficiency with monopoly, or lack thereof. So the first thing I want to do is compare competition with monopoly. And so I want to go back to the previous chapter on competition and just review how we maximize our surplus. And so again, this is our demand, which is our margin utility, and our supply, which is our marginal cost. And this point right here is where the marginal cost is equal to the margin utility. And so this would be the efficient output, and it's also the equilibrium output because that's where supply and demand intersect. So this would be our consumer surplus up here. Everything below demand, above the price line, over to output QC. That's our consumer surplus. And this is the surplus for the suppliers. Everything that's below the price line, above the supply line, over to output QC. And so this is our consumer surplus, that's our producer surplus, and it's maximized. We can't get any more. If we go past this point, we're going to be throwing surplus away because the marginal costs will now be higher. And we got an all we can over here. We produce every unit of output that has margin utility greater than our marginal cost, which is what you want to do. And we've done all of this, and we've done none of this, which would be if we're over here somewhere. So that is how we maximize our surplus, by producing every unit that has a higher margin utility than marginal cost, and not producing anything that has a higher marginal cost than margin utility. Now let's compare that to a monopoly. So what I did is I kept supply and demand the same. I just added a marginal revenue line. And so let's assume that the market had 1,000 firms in it when it was competitive, and let's say they all merged together to form one company, which was the case back in the late 1880s or the late 1800s, where there's no antitrust laws and mergers took place with companies producing ice, producing steel. You had a lot of your trusts back then where they would merge together to form one large company. By doing so, they now are a price maker, and if they're a price maker, they can calculate their margin of revenue based on their demand right there. And so now they want to maximize profits. Remember, this is the marginal cost. And so they'll maximize profits again right here. That's the profit maximizing rule. And this would be profit maximizing output. And that would be monopoly output. So the competitive market would produce here, and the monopoly is going to produce there. So know that a monopoly will produce less than if the market was competitive. And then they can charge any price they want. They can't make customers pay any price, but they can charge any price. And they want to charge a price where they maximize their profits. And so this would be the price the monopoly will charge. So they would charge a higher price, and they would produce less than if the market was competitive. And by doing so, they will maximize their profits, and they will make more money. So now where is the consumer surplus? Well, it used to be everything below demand above price PC over to QC, but now the price is now price PM higher, and so the surplus would be everything, again, below demand above the current price over the output QM. So this would be the new consumer surplus. A lot less amount, and it's a less amount for two reasons. One, they're paying a higher price, customers are, and they're buying less. And therefore, the less amount being bought and the higher price combined together has reduced the surplus for the consumers quite a bit. The producer surplus is everything that's below the price, above supply. Supply is the cost of making things. Price is what they get from the customers, and so this would be their surplus, their profit. And let me just put a different color up there. It's still part of the surplus for the suppliers. I'm just going to make this part a little different color because I want to talk about it. Now, what are these colors? What are these areas over here? Well, that would be our deadweight loss there. Let's see. I need another color. That used to be part of the consumer surplus. It was part of below demand above the competitive price, but now it's gone. No one gets that. It's simply lost. And now it represents a deadweight loss that comes from the consumers. And then the bottom part here, that is lost from the sellers. That used to be part of this producer surplus, but now it's gone. This part here. Why? Because they're no longer selling QC, they're selling less. And so this surplus here they can't get anymore. And you might say, well, why would the monopoly do that? Why would they lose some surplus? Well, they're trading. They're trading this surplus here for that there. This they lose, this they get from customers. Why do they get it from the customers? We're paying a higher price. So this part here was transferred from the consumers to the monopoly when the monopoly charged the higher price. From society's perspective, this is not efficient because these two areas here represent the deadweight loss. This is not a deadweight loss because it does go to someone, but it hurts consumers, and that would be a transfer from the consumers to the monopolists. So from an efficiency standpoint, this is the true damage done to society, and the damage done to consumers would be these two areas here. This part is lost completely. This part has been transferred to the monopoly. And that's what a monopoly does. It has a deadweight loss, but it also transfers wealth surplus from the consumers to the monopoly. And so pretty much this diagram right here is why we have a lot of laws against monopolies, because it doesn't do society any good. It hurts society, and it also is anti-consumer. And because monopoly can be very lucrative, very profitable, it also creates what economists call rent-seeking behavior, where people seek what economists call rent, which rent would tend to be extra payment for things that would normally come in to use anyway. For example, I might be willing to work for, say, $10 an hour, but if you charge me $20, I'll definitely take it. And so the extra $10 would be what economists would call rent. And so people would be paid more than they would need to be paid to actually produce a good or service. And so rent-seeking behavior here would be people trying to get monopolies. So people would go to government for certain types of protection from competition. You find a business might go to the government, farmers go to the government and complain about foreign imports, saying that those imports, which are good for consumers, are bad for us because they drive our prices down. I want you to put on trade barriers, tariffs to keep out foreign products, in which case we can charge our customers more. So again, it's a way to take action to increase economic return, to increase the amount of one's own surplus. And so trying to get government licenses to keep out competition, trade protection, trying to get an exclusive franchise. All this is not good for society. It increases surplus plus sellers, but at the expense of consumers, and will create a deadweight loss. And so it rediverts resources also away from productive uses to unproductive uses. For example, businesses, especially corporations, pay a lot of money on lobbyists and lawyers to try to get to government, Congress, or state government, to try to get special privileges, special help, against steel, if you're steel firms, trying to get Congress to impose tariffs on foreign steel. All that money is spent on lobbyists and lawyers could have been used to develop better products, improvements in steel mills, come up with new technology. So again, this rediverts resources away from productive uses to non-productive uses, where you're simply trying to get special benefits from government. Okay, I'll stop there and come back for part 2 on efficiency.